Recent studies have found high concentrations of lead in soil samples from urban areas. This is a quick look at how it got there. The story of leaded gasoline begins in Dayton, Ohio in the 1920s. Charles Kettering, already well known for inventing the electric starter, was looking for a way to stop automobile engines from knocking. Kettering asked Thomas Midgley, who worked for him at General Motors, to come up with a solution. In 1921, Midgley tried adding tetraethyl lead to gasoline. It worked incredibly well. Suddenly there was no engine knock. Everyone at GM was pretty excited. At this point, lead had been known to be poisonous for many years. Ben Franklin even wrote about it. The immediate effects of large amounts of lead exposure can be very obvious and include vomiting, delirium, and even coma. Because the long-term effects of smaller doses of lead are less obvious, Kettering, General Motors, the oil companies, and ultimately the U.S. government decided that a little lead exposure was probably fine. In 1926, all bans on the production and sale of leaded gasoline were revoked, and for 50 years, cars belched leaded exhaust into the air without restriction. Automobiles continued to rise in popularity, and in 1956, President Dwight Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act. Soon, interstates linked cities across the country, and life without an automobile became almost unthinkable for some people. With their enthusiastic adoption of the automobile, Americans got more than they bargained for. Cars that burn leaded gasoline, of course, have leaded exhaust. All along Eisenhower's highways, they coated lawns, trees, houses, schools, and playgrounds. From 1926 to 1985, 7 million tons of lead was burned in gasoline. In the 1970s, Herbert Needleman and other doctors began studying lead exposure in children. They found high levels of lead in the teeth of children living in urban areas where lead pollution was high. These children did not have the obvious symptoms of lead poisoning, but were found to have lower IQ, more difficulty paying attention, reading disabilities, and to exhibit antisocial behavior. Lead has since been found to have negative effects on every organ system. Lead interferes with many physiological processes at the cellular level by mimicking the action of calcium. In neurons, calcium unlocks the channels that allow neurotransmitters to carry signals across synapses. Lead inhibits these signals by blocking calcium ions. In 1973, the EPA, which was just 3 years old at the time, decided that it was time to start phasing out the use of leaded gasoline. The manufacturers of tetraethyl lead sued the EPA to delay regulation, but were eventually defeated in court. Finally, in 1976, the first of the EPA rules went into effect. Lead was phased out gradually and completely removed from cars by 1996, but it is still used in other vehicles, such as single-engine aircraft. Blood lead levels have dropped considerably since the phase-out of leaded gasoline began. As they've done so, it has become evident that lead is dangerous even at levels below the toxic level, which was considered to be 60 micrograms per deciliter in the 1970s, but has been lowered to 5 micrograms per deciliter today. According to the CDC, there is no safe level of lead in the body. Although regulatory efforts have been successful at reducing the amount of lead being put into the environment, high levels of lead are still left over from historic uses such as gasoline and paint. This leftover lead will remain a threat to public health until something is done to remove it.